All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started as people trickle in here this morning for today's Midwest Cover Crops Council webpage update webinar on our equipment webpage. I'm joined today with Charles Ellis, a retired University of Missouri Extension Specialist. Uh, Today we are going to be going over updates we've made to the Midwest Cover Crops Council's website. So we've made updates to 3 of our web pages, the planting, equipment, and nutrient management web pages. Today we'll focus on the equipment web page updates we've made. So we've expanded this web page out considerably. And that web page can be found at midwestcovercrops.org/equipment. And if at midwestcovercrops.org, you can find the updated planting and nutrient management pages as well. So when we think about where we need to consider equipment in the cover crop cycle, so when we add cover crops into our rotation, we need to consider equipment not only in those field operations that directly involve the cover crop, like cover crop seeding, either that's pre or post harvest of that cash crop, and termination, those operations that directly impact our cover crop. But there's also equipment considerations when we're planting our cash crop and harvesting our cash crop with those standard cash crop equipment that can impact our cover crop stand or that cash crop that we might need to change because we've included the cover crop into our system. So we can group cover crop as seeding equipment into 2 broader categories. We talked about this some for those who joined us yesterday on our planting webinar. We have post-harvest seeding equipment like drills and planters and some spreaders that we can seed cover crops after we've harvested our cash crop. And then we have pre-harvest cover crop seeding equipment where we can go into the still standing cash crop and seed our cover crops before we've harvested our cash crop. You'll see that most of the pre-harvest cover crop seeding equipment is a broadcast type seeder besides the row-based inner seeder. So we have that seed broadcast on the seed surface. So pre-harvest, generally, we're relying on rain to work in that cover crop into that standing cash crop. So we'll go through some of the common seeding equipment used to seed cover crops. So we'll talk about the cost, the seed placement, the need for precipitation, the integration with other equipment or other passes we can do with this equipment, and then what cropping systems it's compatible with. And Charles can add some notes to these equipment as well based on his experiences. So we'll start here with box drills. Box drills, we rated those at a medium cost. They can vary quite a bit in size, and there's varying ages of box drills out there. So we can find them at pretty wide range of price points. Because box drills are designed to seed small seeded crops and grains, they do an excellent job of placing that seed where it needs to be for good growth. And because we're getting that good seed to soil contact, we have a lower need for precipitation than other seeding methods. It's hard to integrate our drills though with any other operation, so we are adding a pass to be able to seed that cover crop, and we're compatible with all cropping systems of row crop, small grains, and oil seeds. We can follow that harvest with a box drill. Any notes on box drills, Charlie?
Well, I might add, just keep in mind, this is a regional group and these are going to be more accessible, in wheat growing areas, Ethan, as opposed to maybe your area where the availability of those may be diminished. So, and then also if you're doing blends with them, you'll have to do some calibration of those unique blends and you could get some sifting or settle or separation maybe, during seeding. So I guess that's my points on that one.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. We don't see many new drills here in Iowa. I see a lot of older drills.
Yeah.
Kind of in that same vein, air drills. Air drills costing higher than our box drills. One of the higher costing cover crop seeding equipment, but still at that excellent seed placement by placing that seed into the ground where we want it and getting good seed to soil contact. And that seed to soil contact lowering our need for precipitation. We can integrate that possibly with a fall fertilizer pass. And because we're coming in post-harvest of whatever crop we're following, we can follow all of the common cropping systems. Any notes on air drills, Charlie?
Yeah, I might add, like, with this one, you'll typically have the air drill probably for, cash crops. So just keep in mind that, you're adding additional expense, wear and tear on an equipment that you're going to be using on cash crop. And these more modern ones are probably easier to seed cover crops with as far as calibration than maybe the box drill is going to be. So, and the size of them, you're going to be able to get over acreage pretty quickly with them.
Row crop planters, we're also starting to see more and more seeding of cover crops with a row crop planter. The cost of a row crop planter, of course, is high, but I think some of the add-ons to make them able to plant small seeded cover crops are relatively lower cost. If we already own that row crop planter for seeding of our cash crop. Really great seed placement with our row crop planters, especially new planters do a great job of placing and spacing seeds. We're in the soil, so we have that lower need for precipitation. Hard to integrate this with any other field operations. And since we're coming in post-harvest of our cash crop, it's compatible with all cropping systems there. What's your thoughts on using the row crop planter to seed cover crops, Charlie?
Well, all good points, Ethan. And I guess with modern planters like this, it opens up new opportunities to like strip row crop or cover cropping with even different species, where you may be able with guidance systems lay out a certain cover crop species you may want to plant the cash crop in the following spring, and then maybe have a different cover crop between the rows. So with electric drives and things like that, Ethan, it's gives you more opportunities to for higher management possibility of cover crops. And again, like with the air drill, you are adding on additional wear and tear to that equipment. But
next up, we're getting into some of the broadcast seeders here. So we have a pendulum spreader, relatively low cost piece of equipment. Seed placement we have rated at fair for the pendulum spreader, which I think is one above what we have for a spinner spreader. Need for precipitation, we are higher because we're broadcasting that seed on top of the ground. So we need a rain to get that to germinate and work into the soil. Hard to integrate this with any other field operations. But since we're calling this as the post-harvest spreading, we are compatible with all cropping systems there. Charlie, what are your thoughts on the pendulum spreader?
well, I guess pendulum spreader, like you said, Ethan, is going to give you a more even spread than the spinner spreaders. That's the advantage of it. Another advantage, it's likely going to be a 3-point that if you're in some soft conditions, got a lighter footprint going across the field. Probably going to be more targeted to smaller acreage farmers than large, but I think it's got a nice niche where you can get an even spread and light footprint going across the field. If you got some wet conditions or moist conditions there in the fall.
Yeah. How wide of a spread pattern can a pendulum spreader?
Well, the one we have with Serial Ride does a nice spread of 50 foot.
Okay.
So, I mean, and you have a capacity there of maybe 12 to 1,500 pounds, at a time. So, it's not, but, with a seed tender, you can still get acreage spread pretty quickly.
So up next, another broadcast spreading method for post-harvest are spinner spreaders. Fairly low cost method to spread that, but our lowest rating on seed placement of marginal seed placement, with difficulties getting that pattern to spread evenly there. Need for precipitation again, because we're broadcast seeding. We need that precipitation to work the seed into the ground. But fairly common operation I see of incorporating that with some sort of fall fertilizer, typically PRK application in the fall. And because we're post-harvest, again, compatible with all our cropping systems. What do you see on spinner spreaders?
Yeah,
area?
you're, double dipping and getting multiple things done at one time, but, you may not get the uniformity of the cover crops, stand out there that you might with some of the previous equipment we were talking about. But, for an introductory point for producers, this is something they may already have, or they rent. So that's kind of an entry point of how to get it seeded.
Yeah, we met with a guy yesterday who was using a spinner spreader to spread cover crops, and the co-op doesn't charge him that extra pass since he's already using that to apply phosphorus.
I guess one thing I might point out on that is we've had some instances in Missouri with a little bit of cereal rye contamination popping up if the carts have not been thoroughly cleaned after use with that situation, and maybe they need to devote some certain carts to that, or maybe we need to ramp up our cleaning of some carts before we go use them for other things.
Still in our broadcast seeders, but getting a little better seed placement. Air broom spreaders, they're gonna have a higher cost than our pendulum or spinner spreaders. Fairly high cost piece of equipment, but we will get better seed placement than the spinner spreader. Again, broadcast seeding, we have that high need for precipitation, and can again integrate that with a fall fertilizer pass, and being post-harvest compatible with all cropping systems. What's your thoughts on an air boom spreader, Charlie?
Probably, like you said, enhances the uniformity of spread over the spinner spreader. You're basically dropping it out of across that boom width. So you're getting you may have multiple hopper bins there where you're able to kind of customize some things to be blended. So if you're looking at better uniformity, that would definitely be the case over the spinner spreader.
Another post-harvest cover crop seeding application is incorporating a seeding box onto tillage piece of equipment. Because those boxes can be relatively low cost, we have this at a low cost, assuming that we've already owned that piece of a tillage equipment. We get good seed placement with that if that piece of equipment is set up correctly to get the seed at the depth it needs to be. We've lowered that need for precipitation by incorporating that seed into the soil. Of course, with this, we're getting two operations in one of still doing fall tillage while seeding our cover crop. And being post-harvest, we're compatible with all cropping systems. What have you seen for incorporation into tillage?
Species selection, I think, Ethan, you might want something that's got a little more tolerance to different seeding depths, or you need to consider where that baffle is distributing the seed. If you're looking like a small seed or rape or turnip or radish, on this picture here, you probably would want to have that distributed right there at the back and not, over incorporate. So kind of take some considerations there of what seed, with cereal rye, we got a lot of flexibility with that as far as seeding depth. So that'd be my caution, with that one is don't set it up based, and bury the seed that you're looking to get growing out there.
The last of our post-harvest pretty much is quickly as we can get it post-harvest is seeding with the combine. Relative cost on this is medium. I think that varies probably quite a bit with how big that combine seeder is and if it's homemade or a purchased option. Seed placement is pretty good with a combine seeder because we're able to get that underneath some of that cash crop residue. But we still have a high need for precipitation, even though we're underneath that cash crop residue and against the soil. It's still good to have a rain or from some soil moisture to get that to start. We're of course integrated there with our harvest operation and compatible with all cropping systems as long as we can get that to work with the right combine platform. What have you seen for combine seeders, Charlie?
Well, I guess the advantage here, Ethan, is the seed gets placed to the soil before the chaff goes over it. So you get better seed to soil contact, get some mulching effect. So that seed doesn't have to work itself down through residue. Some of the newer units now are attached to the combine itself and not the head. So like this system, you'd have to have another one to switch to the corn head maybe, or they're more integrated, I guess, the newer units and maybe what we're showing here on the unit itself and not on the head. So visibility is not impaired like it might be with this one. Things like that, more capacity. So I think they've advanced some of these last couple of years to where they're more user-friendly.
Yeah, the newer ones I've seen you have to fill quite less often than those head-mounted seeders, so they slow harvest down less than before.
Yeah, and you might want, consider a lower seeding rate cover crop there to limit refill time, or kind of coordinate refill time with filling of grain carts, things like that.
All right, moving into our pre-harvest cover crop seeding equipment, we have a sprayer mounted air boom. I think sometimes we see these called as like highboy interseeders or other names for these. Relative cost is fairly high with the cost of that sprayer frame and then converting that to an air boom seeder. Seed placement we have rated at fair, so we're a little better than just a general spinner spreader broadcast because we're able to get that down through the crop canopy, but it is still a broadcast operation with that high need for precipitation. We could probably incorporate that with some in-season fertilizer possibly, but we are limited on our cropping systems here of maybe row crop for sure and possibly small grain if we're willing to have those sprayer tracks through the field. What have you seen for our sprayer mounted air booms, Charlie?
Yeah, for my area in Missouri, there would be we would target like going into standing corn when I think we have about 50% sunlight, reaching the soil surface. Or another rough estimate is when the stalk is dry up to the ear, roughly about that time frame. If you got some time sensitive cover crops to get out there and get some growth, maybe like radish or rape, things like that, low seeding rate, you prevent seed from getting lodged up in the whorl of the corn or in the leaves, so you get a higher percentage reaching the soil. So kind of want to manage this with rainfall patterns, hopefully to get that crop up and growing. And seeing it successful, especially if people wanted to graze some stuff early in the fall with the corn stalks.
Yeah, we see the same thing here where it's one of the more successful methods to establish those early seeded cover crops in the corn, especially like the oats and radish. Another option, so high clearance spreaders that are on row crop tires and have the ability to go into that standing crop. Relative cost of medium, probably costing less than that air boom sprayer, and can be used for other operations as well without any changes to it. But like the spinner spreaders, we have that marginal seeds placement and that high need for precipitation being a broadcast operation. but could be incorporated with an in-season fertilizer pass. Pretty much only probably compatible with a row crop system where we can go down the rows with that piece of equipment. Have you seen these used for standing crops, Charlie?
Yeah, attempted it a couple times, but had limited success with this, and it may be the growing season we have further south than you, Ethan. Couple things to consider. We tried some clay coated seeds to get a better spread pattern. That adds to the cost of the cover crop seed, but it does spread uniformly. Very weather dependent after spreading as far as temperature, rainfall. Probably need to pick some species that are more shade tolerant than others. And then also herbicide chemistry you're using in that cash crop. Probably need to take consideration of that to keep that from inhibiting the cover crop from growing.
Row-based interseeders, kind of a unique piece of equipment for seeding cover crops in that early interseeding period. So a medium cost of equipment there with good seed placement because we're likely placing that seed into the soil. So that lowered our need for precipitation as well. We can't integrate with other operations, but I think I have seen these maybe included with side dress operations as well. But we're probably targeting a row crop system where we can get down those rows with that piece of equipment. I think usually at that V4 to V6 stage. What have you seen for early interseeding equipment, Charlie?
Well, it's going to enhance the chance of success over the broadcast getting it in the soil, but I think Ethan also producers going to have to work through their herbicide program, make sure that that's not going to be working against the cover crop. And I guess the size of operation or acreage that can be covered in that, I'm not sure, if that's going to be a high acreage system for people to be using right now.
One I'm seeing increasing interest and use of is drone aerial application for pre-harvest. So relative cost medium there for the drones, but that seed placement, because we're a broadcast pretty high aerial operation, is marginal with that high need for precipitation. Hard to integrate this with other operations because of our low payload. We're probably just wanting to put cover crop seed into that drone and compatible with our row crop systems mostly. What have you seen for drone applications, Charlie?
Well, don't go by book values with these, Ethan, that they're coming with. You got to do some calibration with them. Two things that affect calibration is the opening in the box, dropping onto the spinner, and then also the spinner speed. So those two variables you got to adjust to get that rate. And then also some data we've collected at Mizzou. Wind speed has a big effect on spread distribution of these with the seed size, seed shape, cereal rye or annual ryegrass and clover. They're all going to kind of fall through that, wind differently. So you need to consider that, but they're attracted by being able to access maybe some smaller or irregular shaped fields that you don't want to go into with other equipment. If you want to do some customizing of some grazing later in the fall, you can set up some different blends and mixes, around the farm, and then quick response time. If you have rain coming through to get emergence, you can react quickly with the drone. So I think it's got potential.
And then on to our classic form of aerial application with airplanes. So relative cost, medium there. Most producers paying to have that airplane done and not owning this equipment. Because it's that aerial broadcast, marginal, and a high need for precipitation with any of these broadcast aerial applications. Difficult to integrate this with any other operations, and compatible with our row crop, where we have that area to get that seed in between our rows. What notes do you have for seeding with an
Just,
airplane?
likely you're going to be looking at a lower seeding rate species, the smaller seed than trying to drop 50 pounds of cereal rye out of an airplane. More of the 5 to 7 pound seeding rates of other species. Proximity to an airport also can have an effect on that. So definitely an option. It's just these other factors you're going to want to consider in selecting what you're going to see.
And timing can be more difficult with a rain there.
Mhm.
Using a contractor for that, we're probably on their schedule and not with the weather schedule as well.
You'll be on a list is what you'll be.
Yeah. All right, I think that wraps up our cover crop seeding equipment slides. So I thought it'd be good to talk some about what we should consider when we're doing cash crop harvest, what equipment setup we should have on that to ensure we have a good stand of cover crops. One thing we should probably talk about, Charlie, is residue spread and pattern. I know you've done some work on that.
Just the size of the combines, Ethan, 40 plus foot wide heads. I think residue on these combines has been kind of overlooked as far as getting that evenly spread. And I think some of the manufacturers, you have to maybe pay additional for an option to get better residue spread. When kind of my opinion ought to be a standard equipment, but just the size of the equipment to get that evenly spread is getting to be challenging, and with the increasing size. So just have the right spreader style on the back of the combine to do what you need it to do.
Yeah, and I think that's what we see here in the photo on my slide is where we had uneven spread of residue, and that affected that cover crop emergence, which could give us issues in the spring of planting and termination.
And
What about residue sizing with the harvest equipment? What do we need to think about in terms of how we size that residue?
well, I think that may be a geographical preference, on yields that are going on in the area. More finely chopped residue is going to be more susceptible to maybe wind erosion or floating off the field. Whereas if you've got larger pieces of residue and you're like drilling through it, those larger pieces may be easier to slice through than a lot of smaller pieces. So I think I'd take into account your yield environment of how much you're dealing with, and decomposition you need over the winter time, for that residue.
What about header cutting height for
Well,
beans?
I would, like to have it as high as possible. If you're no-tilling the following spring, attached residue is easier to slice through than something on the ground, and soil moisture may dry out more quickly with that standing residue than if there's a mat laying on the soil surface. So again, that might be a regional thing of preference, but that's kind of what I would prefer, is have that stalk still attached upright, and the row opener, disc opener can go around or through that easier than if it's laying on the ground.
Kind of in that same note, maybe discuss chopping corn heads a bit, and if we should be using those, if we're not going to be harvesting those corn stalks, and the spread pattern with those.
Uh, I think chopping corn heads in our area have kind of waned a little bit, I think. But I think maybe in your area with continuous corn, they're probably still a pretty popular necessary thing there. So that's, I think, probably more of a regional difference too.
Yeah, we see quite a bit of chopping corn heads yet. All right. Moving on to our other cash crop operation of planting our cash crop, there's probably some considerations we need to think about there, especially if we still have either cover crop residue or green cover crop in that field. The first one of these, maybe you want to talk about, Charlie, is your row cleaners on the planter.
Um, well, row cleaners, if you're using them, you want to have, minimum soil disturbance. Seen some areas where, row cleaners are being used, and then we have a heavy rainfall, and we have real bad seed trench erosion could happen with those. So kind of use those with caution on that. Row cleaners are likely going to uh, have more uniformity of soil temperature, in that seed trench across the field than without. So I think they have a purpose there, but if you're using them for tillage, then you're start running a risk of having problems.
We see this discussion more and more with newer planters that have uh, variable down pressure, but I think it's good to talk about with all row crop planters what our considerations for down pressure should be. How does that change if we have a cover crop in the field?
Um, well, with the down pressure, we have, like I said, some newer technology that can sense it going across. I think if you look at the data, it's if you're going to err on the side of too much down pressure instead of not enough, especially with corn planting, and you'll start having uh, variable seeding depths, things like that. So the down pressure, kind of a rule of thumb is go back and grab that gauge wheel, and it should just be take some force to make it turn. If it's freely spinning, you need to add more. If it's really kind of making an indentation in the soil, then you've got it, too heavy, Ethan. So I don't know if the cover crop itself, affects the amount of down pressure on the soil much at all.
What about disc openers? What do we need to consider on a planter with our disc openers every year?
Make sure they are sharp, properly aligned, contact points, diameters correct. These bullet points here pretty much affect any conditions you're using the planter. Different manufacturers will have different diameter of openers, and just make sure you have that contact point between the double disc openers correct, and they're in top shape to get cut through the residue.
All right, something I see a lot of options for, the advertisements is closing wheel systems for planters. What do we need to look at as far as closing that seed trench?
Something that's going to close the seed trench. I'm sure you've seen a lot of advertisements where you've got it seems like one manufacturer they're adding an add-on that another manufacturer is doing. It's kind of like they seem like they prefer what's on the other side of the fence sometimes, whether it's a uh, cast wheels or closing discs, things like that. Kind of have to experiment, I think, with your own farm and situation to kind of come up with what works best for you there. And you may just start with a couple of row units at a time to see how they're doing before you commit the whole planter to that changeover.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is pretty soil type dependent on what really
Mhm.
works best, and that's
Yeah,
why we see so many options out there.
yeah.
Um, Maybe talk a bit about termination timing. So a lot of these settings we've talked about are spinning parts on the planter, and that can have some wrapping issues too. We maybe want to consider how termination affects
Mhm.
what we do with the planter.
Yeah, termination timing, if you've got a electric drive planter, that wrapping issue kind of vanishes. Termination timing, I think, has been kind of a uh, point where a lot of producers just starting with cover crops will have a bad experience or a hiccup that kind of messes things up. I prefer that, if you're using cover crops, have your own sprayers, so you're not dependent on a someone else's schedule to terminate it. If you're just starting out, maybe terminate early so you don't have to manage with that waiting on the soil to dry out. As you get more experience, then you can start planting green, like in the slide here. The worst case scenario with this picture, Ethan, is if they had maybe sprayed that a week before this planter is going through it, and then 2 or 3 inches of rainfall, and you've got dying cover crop and wet soil and no way to dry it out, really.
We'll move on to talk a little bit about the possible equipment to terminate our cover crop. So the first up here, we have probably the most common termination option of the sprayer. So a sprayer should work with all species depending on what chemistry we use. What growth stage we can use to spray cover crops is going to depend on that chemistry we use and the species we're trying to terminate. Some considerations with that, of course, is to follow our herbicide label to ensure efficacy and that we're following all the rules for our regions. What's your notes on sprayers, Charlie?
Well, I'd recommend Purdue has a publication, Ethan, on water quality. I think it's probably a overlooked thing as far as activity or efficacy of some herbicides. So kind of know what your water is. For our area, we have very hard water. The higher pH, you might need to make some adjustments there. If you're doing a mix, a herbicide mix, make sure the compatibility of that. Some of those herbicides may hold back the efficacy of what you're using to terminate the cover crop, or may enhance it. So kind of have to do some exploration and research on those combinations that will work for you there.
Yeah, so it's probably important to test your water source for spraying and know what you're working with there before you start mixing. Okay, moving on. So we can also use a mechanical method to terminate cover crops with tillage. Effective for probably nearly all cover crop species if we do a good job with that tillage pass. And it's most effective in those early growth stages of most cover crops. The more residue and biomass we have out there, the harder that tillage operation is going to be. But that still might require multiple passes. If we don't get all that residue buried or those roots buried, some of those might come back and require a second pass to follow up and take those out. What success have you seen as for tillage terminating cover crops?
Well, I'd have to say producers I work with, are using cover crops in a no-till system, but I have seen it used. But just when like you stated, the longer you wait to do the tillage, the root mass of the cover crop may make tillage a little more challenging, may take more trips. That seed bed may not be as finished as you would like. So really not a termination use that I've looked at a whole lot.
We see this a lot with those planting green or in organic systems as well. Roller crimpers to terminate cover crops. Works well with select grass species and at a particular growth stage of that heading or flowering anthesis stage. But it does require that high level of management because we have to be out there at that right stage to get that roller crimper to work effectively. And we can always combine herbicide in a roller crimper to ensure we get good termination if that works with your cropping system. What have you seen with roller crimpers, Charlie?
Well, what I would recommend on that is probably plant the cash crop before you roller crimp it. So your row unit has easier job of going through standing residue or standing plant than trying to cut through the rolled cover crop. I think you'd have better cutting, seed to soil contact, probably better closing discs will probably work better than if it's trying to do that after you've rolled and crimped the cover crop.
And I think if roller crimping's in your plan, we need to consider that at planting that cover crop as well, because we want everything at that same stage when we go in and terminate. We don't want plants at different stages and some popping back up.
Yeah, definitely. Good point. Yeah.
One more termination method here. I've kind of combined if we were just mowing to terminate and leaving that residue out there, if we were mowing that with a hay bine with the intent of baling that for dry hay or baleage, and then running some sort of silage chopper through there as well to harvest that for forage. All of those are just a cutting operation. So they should work with select species that won't regrow if they're at a certain growth stage. So we want to make sure we know what growth stage we can cut that and where we need to cut that to make sure it effectively terminates that and that we're cutting below the growth point there. What have you seen for forage or just mowing termination, Charlie?
I'd say, like you pointed out, Ethan, be prepared for some escapes or regrowth that may happen. You might have to, chemically terminate that. I would plant if you're not using it for foliage or hay crop, probably plant again before you do the mowing, just so the row unit has better conditions to run in or easier job than cutting through all that residue that's laying there loose. And then try to have a mowing a mower that's going to evenly distribute that residue. I mean, if you start getting windrowing effect from the bush hog or mower, then you're going to have some some emergence problems start to pop up there.
Okay, and I think that wraps us covering the information we've added to the equipment webpage. But we do have additional equipment resources in terms of some fact sheets from MCCC and other resources on our website. So if you go to that equipment page and you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll find our articles on equipment or articles that have other topics, but consider equipment in them as well, are all linked there at the bottom. So thanks for joining us today, everyone.